The cinematic world was not just shaken, it was fractured on October 11, 2025, by the news of Diane Keaton's passing. She had departed from this life in the same solitude she had cultivated. A final surrender after battling her relentless, private illnesses. But what truly captivated and shocked the public, perhaps even more than the death of an icon, was the immediate, theatrical, and almost perfectly scripted reaction of Al Pacino, her 15-year on-screen partner and off-screen obsession. Immediately after receiving the news, Pacino reportedly wept quietly, delivering the devastatingly tragic exclamation, "I will regret for the rest of my life not marrying Diane. She was the greatest love of my life." He was, in that moment, reportedly haunted by the memory of her ultimate ultimatum, "Marry me or we break up," a choice where he, prioritizing his own freedom, chose to walk away. Now, with her gone, that same regret has been allowed to blossom into an unbearable, and very public, burden. He couldn't even bring himself to attend the funeral. Instead, Pacino chose to remember Diane in his heart, a poetic gesture that also conveniently shielded him from the prying eyes and difficult questions. He is said to be keeping all her memories alive, clinging to old photographs, handwritten letters, and small gifts, as if each of these keepsakes, these totems of a past he rejected, could somehow remind him that the woman he refused to commit to never truly left. What heartbreaking scenes, or perhaps what calculatedly heartbreaking performances, unfolded at Diane's funeral? Who actually showed up to pay their final respects? On the morning of October 11, 2025, in Los Angeles, the day was deceptively gentle. The sunlight clear, filtering through tall leaves onto the road before the mansion Diane Keaton once called her private sanctuary of imagination, a fortress built to keep the prying world out. The house was quiet, as always, alive only with the ambient sound of wind and birdsong. But inside that curated, sterile calm, something was shattered by an intrusion no one could have anticipated. At 8:08 a.m., the emergency dispatch received a call that was chilling in its brevity. Person down. There were no further details. Just 3 cold, weighty, anonymous words. Rescue 19 was immediately dispatched, its crew entirely unaware that in a few short minutes, they would be entering the inner sanctum of one of America's most legendary and fiercely private film stars. When the paramedics arrived, the imposing iron gate was still closed. There was no unusual noise, no sign of panic. A woman from inside, an assistant or handler, opened the door and led them in. Diane Keaton was found motionless, discovered in the very room flooded with the light she had used for reading scripts and writing in her journal. Everything around her was meticulously, almost unnaturally, neat. There were no signs of a disturbance, no fallen objects, only a thick, profound silence remained, as curated and absolute as the nature of her departure itself. They transported her along the same tree-lined street she had driven down countless times. The ambulance departed in silence, as if respecting the fragile, artificial peace of the morning. Just hours later, the world learned that Diane Keaton had passed away at the age of 79. The news detonated instantly, but all details of her final health condition were immediately and aggressively locked down. The family confirmed a sudden health decline, but flatly refused to disclose the specific cause. A silence that only fueled a frenzy of speculation. In the following days, journalists and fans, starved for a narrative, began piecing together the grim, familiar fragments. Diane's public, decades-long battles with skin cancer, her tortured, secret years wrestling with bulimia, her increasingly frail and gaunt appearance in recent times. But no one had any hard evidence that these past demons were directly related to her final morning. Every detail remained vague, like the sunlight filtering through the leaves of her mansion, brilliant. Yes, but deliberately torn into countless, obscuring fragments. Hollywood, of course, was shaken. Those who had worked with Diane, from Woody Allen to Nancy Meyers, dutifully sent in their boilerplate tributes, recalling her signature smile, the iconic fedora tilted just so, the natural poise no one else could imitate. Yet behind this avalanche of public praise and recycled anecdotes, a cold, dark void remained. Who was the first to find her? Who made that cryptic, cold call for help? And why did everything happen so fast, so cleanly? So quietly? No one has a definitive answer. We will dissect the illnesses that plagued Diane, the ones Hollywood standards likely inflicted upon her, later in this video. For now, let's move on to Diane Keaton's funeral, where a legend was laid to rest in what can only be described as a carefully stage-managed performance of grief. What we know is this: the funeral took place almost immediately. The family, or her handlers, chose a small, exclusive seaside garden where ancient olive trees whispered with the wind, as if nature itself was cooperating with the private promise Diane once recorded in her memoir. Her family, along with her 2 adopted children, Dexter and Duke, selected this peaceful corner, deliberately far from the blinding Hollywood spotlight she had conquered but, as the narrative insists, never let define her. On October 14, 2025, a mere 3 days after her passing, the film world dutifully paused for its required moment of silence to honor the woman who had reshaped the image of quirky, neurotic humor and resilience. As the first hand-picked guests quietly stepped through the wrought iron gate, the air was heavy with something. Wordless grief? Perhaps. Bette Midler, Diane's companion from the manufactured laughter of the First Wives Club, arrived first, a requisite gray scarf artfully concealing her tear-stained cheeks. She clung to Carol Bear Sager's hand, a woman who had publicly witnessed Diane's frailty in her final days. Whispering, she never pretended, she never competed. She was simply Diane, with that mischievous smile, a line that sounds suspiciously perfect, almost scripted for the occasion. They took their places in the front row, beside simple white flowers, not vibrant, showy roses, but sprigs of lavender from Diane's old garden, a calculated symbol of the simplicity she always pursued. No grand orchestra played, only an old piano, softly sounding the melody from Annie Hall, the music Diane once called, in another perfectly quotable line, "the laughter of my soul." The family was the heart of this performance, a warm, protective circle against the salty sea breeze. Dexter, the 29-year-old daughter with her mother's eyes, stood first, her voice trembling, yet predictably resolute. "Mom taught us that life is a comedy, sometimes clumsy, sometimes painful, but always, always worth applauding." Duke, her 25-year-old son, sat beside her, holding her hand, his eyes dutifully red as he recalled curated afternoons when Diane would wear eccentric hats and laugh with Reggie, her golden retriever companion. They didn't break into messy, uncontrollable sobs. They shared small, polite, intimate stories. How Diane had adopted them at 50. How she had turned their house into a world of books and unfinished scripts. This was her wish, they insisted, not a showy ceremony, but a private place where the family could whisper words of love, safely away from the prying, judgmental eyes of the public who had fed her entire career. Woody Allen, naturally, arrived late, a diminutive figure dwarfed by the simple wooden chairs, his pale face looking like someone who had just stepped out of one of his own self-absorbed films. The man who created Annie Hall with Diane, the masterpiece that won her the 1978 Oscar, sat alone, an unlit cigarette clutched in his hand, the perfect prop for a man of his cinematic stature. When invited to speak, his voice was hoarse. Diane was the embodiment of creativity. She didn't act, she lived, with that self-deprecating humor that only true geniuses possess. Those around nodded, recalling the famously complex, neurotic, and inspiring relationship between them. The films that portrayed Diane Keaton as unyielding, always challenging conventions. There were no arguments today, only a quiet, unified tribute to the woman who, they claimed, transformed her fear into laughter. Also present, the Hollywood royalty, the aging lions, Francis Ford Coppola, the man who cast Diane as the perpetually suffering, long-suffering Kay Adams in the Godfather trilogy, stepped in with heavy, symbolic steps, as if carrying the entire bloated legacy of the 1970s on his shoulders. He embraced Robert De Niro, a longtime colleague, before sitting. Everything about Diane was creativity, Coppola said in a brief, expected eulogy, his warm voice echoing through the simple microphone. De Niro, his eyes appropriately red, added, "I am deeply saddened and shocked. I cherished her, a kind woman in a chaotic world. They spoke of long nights on set where Diane not only acted but encouraged everyone, turning tragic scenes into moments of humanity. The hagiography was in full effect. The air seemed to thicken as everyone listened silently, as if they were all consciously participating, and perhaps judging each other's performances. In the final scene of a classic film, two other figures attended, Reese Witherspoon and Goldie Hawn, representing the next generation, dutifully carrying wildflowers from fields Diane supposedly once loved. Witherspoon, whom Diane had allegedly mentored as a teen in Wildflower, spoke with a choked voice. She changed how we see women on screen. Smart, funny, and completely original. Hawn, with a practiced sad smile, held Jane Fonda tightly, whispering about book club gatherings where Diane was always the center, with her quirky fashion and everyday stories. Michael Douglas, sitting in the back row, called the loss heartbreaking, praising Diane as one of the greatest icons. As the sun began to set, the performance moved to its next act, a memorial. A large screen played the required clips. Diane in Something's Got to Give, smiling brightly beside Jack Nicholson. Diane in Father of the Bride, embracing Steve Martin like a true mother. Each scene reminded the attendees of the approved narrative, from a girl in Santa Ana with Broadway dreams, through groundbreaking roles, to a mother, a director, and a quiet advocate for mental health. Leonardo DiCaprio, sitting quietly, whispered to a companion, "She was one of a kind, and I was honored to work with her." No raucous songs, only gentle, somber piano notes, guiding the elite crowd into a quiet reflection, where their sorrow could blend with their gratitude for having been part of the same exclusive, validating club. However, the most anticipated tribute, the one the public truly craved, came from the man who wasn't there, her former lover, Al Pacino. He was her longtime colleague and, according to the legend, the great love of her life. Upon hearing the news of Keaton's passing, Pacino sank into a pain described by his inner circle as extremely profound and haunting. Their story, the one that defines them both, began in 1971, on the set of The Godfather, where Keaton played the naive, waspy Kay Adams and Pacino embodied the chilling, magnetic Michael Corleone. Those years together, fueled by passion and career-driven conflict, left an indelible mark on him. And now, conveniently after her death, that regret has been allowed to become a dominating, all-consuming, public emotion. Close friends dutifully recounted that he wept the moment he received the news, his hands trembling as he gripped the phone, unable to believe that the woman he had loved so deeply, and the woman he had so decisively abandoned, was gone forever. He reportedly sat quietly for hours, his eyes fixed on old photographs, fetishizing the past, moments of Diane laughing on the Godfather set, everyday smiles in Santa Ana that he had kept in albums, staring at them, again and again, in silence. Pacino himself, of course, never issued a direct public statement. Instead, his closest friends were dispatched, like press secretaries, to reveal that he was in deep anguish, consumed by a very specific, very romantic regret, not proposing when the opportunity was in his hands. "Marry me or we break up," Keaton had demanded. Pacino chose to walk away. And now, only now, after her death, he realizes that opportunity was lost forever. Friends described him repeatedly muttering the tragic, philosophical line, "If it's destiny, it's never too late for a second chance." But sadly for him, now it's too late. Pacino's regret was not just his own personal pain, it became his public tribute to the woman who had supposedly brought balance and peace to his chaotic, self-obsessed life. In his own memoirs, he had confessed, "Being with Diane, it was very much about a sense of peace and comfort. I found a type of comfort that lets you feel and think with the world." Now, those memories of her smiles, of afternoons on set, of ordinary moments, have become the only treasures he keeps. Pacino, pointedly, did not attend the funeral. His friends explained that the pain was simply too great for him to cross that gate. He wanted, they claimed, to remember Diane in his own heart, keeping her image alive forever in his mind, safe from the reality of a casket. He wanted everything about her to remain intact, just as he cherished it, unaltered by the funeral or the curious eyes of the public. The image of Keaton, with her mischievous smile and open heart, remained vivid in his mind, conveniently transcending any mundane ritual or shared farewell. In the days following, he spent hours revisiting old photographs from The Godfather Part 2 and Part 3. The periods where their love affair was supposedly at its most intense. A close friend revealed he was haunted by memories, quietly recalling the years they shared, from exhausting shoots to the simple, everyday moments that Keaton always knew how to turn into unforgettable memories. That unfinished love, the one he refused to finish, has now become his great, lifelong, romantic burden. He opened her old notebook, flipping through handwritten scripts, and on one occasion, allegedly burst into tears upon seeing her words, "Don't forget to smile, even when the world is against you." He also kept a silver bracelet she had given him for Christmas in 1975. Each time he looked at it, he seemed to hear her warm, mischievous voice. In 2017, at her AFI Lifetime Achievement Award, Pacino delivered an emotional tribute, proclaiming, "I will love you forever." Now, those words resonate as a hollow, tragically belated farewell. It emphasizes the narrative that to him, Diane wasn't just a star, but the greatest love of his life, an irreplaceable part of his soul that he, nevertheless, refused to marry when he had the chance. In Pacino's heart, she still lives, radiant, indomitable, and whole, just as the person Hollywood once admired, and the man who left her, now needs her to be. But despite this illustrious and successful career, this carefully constructed image of quirky resilience, Diane Keaton endured extremely fragile health. In the last months of her life, she quietly faced a sudden, rapid decline that shocked those friends and fans who were actually paying attention. Her medical history noted 2 major, public battles, skin cancer and bulimia. From the age of 21, she faced basal cell carcinoma, a hereditary disease that had also affected her aunt, father, and brother. Around 2014, she underwent 2 surgeries to remove squamous cell carcinoma from her cheek, a challenge that turned her into an ardent advocate for sun protection. "It has pursued me all my life," she said, which led friends to worry that the long-term after-effects may have contributed to her frailty, especially as her body appeared alarmingly thin and fragile in her final weeks. As Carol Bear Sager described after meeting her in Palm Springs, bulimia was the other, darker, more secretive chapter in Keaton's life, beginning in the 1970s when the intense, soul-crushing pressure to lose weight for the Broadway musical Hair pushed her into uncontrollable, self-destructive eating habits. She confessed, decades later, to consuming up to 20,000 calories a day, fried chicken, mountains of fries, entire cakes, and then purging. It was a habit she called an addiction, and the lowest point of my life. Weekly therapy helped her manage it, but she always considered herself a recovering addict. Although the disorder did not publicly recur, it left a deep, permanent mental scar, causing her to live in isolation during her early career. Friends have speculated that this psychological aftermath, the lasting, invisible damage of Hollywood's impossible standards of female perfection, made her more vulnerable when her health declined in old age. This sudden decline became frighteningly noticeable in the final months of 2025. Shocking those in her inner circle, Carol Bear Sager, her close friend, met Keaton in Palm Springs after the January 2025 wildfires and was stunned to see her unusually thin. "She was still smiling, still humorous," Sager reported, "but looked very, very frail." Others also noticed she had stopped her favorite habits, like her daily walks with her golden retriever, Reggie, the subject of the last image she ever posted on Instagram a few weeks before her passing. An anonymous friend provided the requisite quote, "Diane didn't want anyone making a fuss. She kept it private, as if she didn't want us to worry." Fans, however, began to notice worrying signs from Keaton's rare public appearances. A post from an entertainment news account described Diane as looking exhausted, pale, much thinner than before. Another deeply unusual sign was her decision to sell her dream home in Los Angeles for a staggering $29 million in March 2025. This house, where she had lived since 2017 and had written a book about, symbolized her obsession with architecture and her curated family stability. Friends viewed the sale as unlike her, suggesting her health or mental state had deteriorated to the point of her changing her entire lifestyle. She loved that place, a source shared, always said she would live there forever with Dexter and Duke. This decision, coupled with her vanishing public appearances, suggested she may have sensed her body was weakening but, true to her fiercely private form, chose to face it utterly alone. On the morning of October 11th, the Los Angeles Fire Department was called to her home at 8:08 a.m. for emergency medical assistance. She was transported to the hospital but did not survive. Diane Keaton passed away on October 11th, 2025, in Los Angeles, at the age of 79. Her passing left a huge, stylized void in the hearts of fans in the film industry. Her legacy, they say, will be forever remembered. Additionally, for many years, people have wondered why Diane Keaton, an icon of modern, independent femininity, never entered into marriage, despite famously passionate, high-profile relationships with other talented, difficult men, from Woody Allen to Warren Beatty. It was the nearly 15-year love affair, or obsession, with Al Pacino that left the profound, defining mark. It haunted her and, ultimately, led her to remain single. This passionate, toxic, and tragic relationship didn't just shape her heart, it became the very reason she declined all other proposals. As if her heart had been entirely colonized and broken by one person and could not, or would not, open again. In the twilight of her life, when she passed on October 11th, 2025, this love story remained an unfinished, haunting melody, echoing through all the stories and memories of her. They first met in 1971, on the set of The Godfather, where Keaton, a rising Broadway star, played Kay Adams, the perpetually naive, patient, wasp wife of Michael Corleone, portrayed by Pacino. From the very first glance, Keaton was captivated by Pacino, a man she described as having crazy beauty and an explosive energy. Like fire, she once said that Pacino was everything to her, from endless evenings of conversation to emotionally charged, silent moments on set. Their love ignited during the filming of The Godfather Part 2, 1974. When they found a destructive, codependent harmony in art and big dreams, they strolled the streets of New York, hand in hand, as if the entire world of Hollywood were merely a backdrop for their own epic, narcissistic love story. Their relationship spanned the 1970s and 1980s, but it was never a smooth line. It was a passionate, exhausting, destructive tango, interspersed with breakups and reconciliations, like scenes endlessly reshot for a perfection that never came. Keaton, with her famously open heart, loved Pacino sincerely, from laughing at his jokes to quietly sitting by his side, listening to him analyze Shakespeare. Pacino, with his free-spirited, borderline pathological nature and his all-consuming career obsessions, brought her both intense joy and agonizing pain. He is a lost genius, and I wanted to be his guide, she once wrote in an unpublished letter, later revealed by friends, casting herself in the tragic role of savior. Yet that very freedom, which she found so alluring, also made her yearn for the one thing Pacino could not, or would not, provide: a permanent promise, a marriage. During those years, Keaton began dreaming of a conventional family, a home where she could be herself, without the stage hat or the spotlight, a house with children's laughter. It was a dream she pathetically hoped Pacino would help build. But Pacino, despite loving her deeply, was pathologically obsessed with his career and his unbound bachelor lifestyle. On evenings by the fireplace, Keaton would hold his hand, quietly asking about the future, only to receive hugs and vague, empty promises. He loves me, I know, but he can belong to no one, she confided to a close friend, her voice full of the tragic regret of a woman who knows she's betting on a losing horse. Those moments of quiet rejection were etched into her heart like a sweet, festering wound that never healed. The climax, and the final execution, of their love came during the filming of The Godfather Part 3, 1990. The final film bringing them back together as the estranged Michael and Kay. The set was full of emotion, with scenes that made Keaton feel as if she were reliving their toxic love story all over again. She hoped this would be the chance for Pacino to finally change, to grow up, to build a future together. But when she issued the final, desperate ultimatum, "Marry me or we break up," Pacino, though pained, still chose to walk away. "I was too young, too busy with work," he later confessed, the classic, hollow excuse of a man terrified of commitment. Keaton, with a broken but resilient heart, finally decided to end the codependent relationship. "I loved him completely, and that was all I had," she wrote in her diary, a line conveniently revealed by friends after her death. The breakup in 1990 wasn't just the end of a love affair. It was the moment that calcified Keaton's choice to remain single forever. After Pacino, she never fully opened her heart to anyone else. Though she had brief relationships and proposals from other men, she always declined. "I loved Al with all my heart," she told a friend, "and no one can fill that void." Her love with Pacino, though passionate, left a haunting, not of loss, but of having given everything and receiving, in return, an incomplete, broken dream. It made her fearful of commitment, terrified that no other love could ever match the intensity of those dysfunctional, painful years. Instead of marriage, Keaton found solace, or perhaps a more reliable substitute, in motherhood. At age 50, she adopted 2 children, Dexter and Duke, and turned her home into a fortress, a curated world full of books, films, and laughter, designed to keep the disappointments of the world at bay. She once said in a 2019 Guardian interview, "I don't need a man to feel complete. I have my children, and that's my greatest love." Yet deep down, friends noticed she still carried Pacino's shadow, not with bitterness, they claim, but as a beautiful yet painful memory. The wide-brimmed hats, the quirky, layered outfits, her loud, nervous laughter, it all carried the breath of those days. The armor of a woman who had been deeply, permanently wounded and had decided to make that wound her entire personality. Upon her passing, Diane left behind the cold, hard proof of her success, an impressive estate estimated at around $100 million. Her assets included income from her classic roles, but also, significantly, massive profits from her savvy side hustle of buying and renovating historic homes in Southern California. As a lifelong single woman who never married, Keaton carefully planned her estate, ensuring it was distributed privately and thoughtfully, primarily through a family trust, to protect her 2 adopted children and honor the values of privacy and control she cherished throughout her life. Keaton's film career was the foundation of her wealth, with millions from blockbuster films and royalties from classic works. Additionally, she diversified her income through directing, producing, and writing books, including her memoirs and books on interior design. However, real estate remained her largest and most profitable asset, earning her the title of a high-end house flipper in Los Angeles. A prime example was the Brentwood home she purchased in 2009 for $4.7 million, which she renovated into an architectural masterpiece and listed for a staggering $28.9 million in March 2025. Just months before her death, other transactions, like the house sold to Madonna, generated tens of millions in profit, showcasing her unique taste and sharp business acumen. Keaton's diverse portfolio included cash, stocks, and tangible assets such as art, photography, and antique furniture. She lived frugally, avoiding extravagance, and was described as a careful asset manager with legal advisor support. There were no reports of debt or financial disputes, and she had established a family trust shortly after adopting her children. This trust ensured the estate would be allocated without the grubby spectacle of public court proceedings. Honoring her obsessive desire for privacy, most of Keaton's $100 million estate was dedicated to her 2 adopted children, Dexter and Duke, whom she had called the greatest love of my life. Dexter, a veterinary technology graduate who lives privately, shared memories of her mother on social media, while Duke pursued music with his mother's support. Beyond her family, Keaton allocated only a small, almost obligatory, portion of her estate to charity. Diane Keaton's funeral was, by all accounts, a solemn and intimate affair, attended by her family, her few close friends, and several well-known colleagues. Many shared the approved, fond memories of her, Her humor, her charm, her resilience. Colleagues paid their heartfelt, public tributes, honoring Keaton's enormous cinematic legacy and her impact on American arts. The funeral space was filled with condolences, fresh flowers, and curated stories of her inspiring life, all reflecting the respect and affection people held for this legendary actress. And Al Pacino, the lover who was conspicuously absent, spoke his own tribute, reportedly calling her the only one I ever wanted to marry. What do you think of Diane Keaton? A strong yet fragile woman? An icon of art? Or a character trapped by her own neuroses and the men she chose? Share your thoughts. Subscribe for more videos that peel back the veneer of these Hollywood legends. And thank you for joining us on this journey to honor the complex, contradictory, and ultimately tragic figure of Diane Keaton.